All right, good morning everyone. We're Finals Team 8, and today we will be presenting our assessment of the Robert A. Kalka Metropolitan Skyport.
This is the agenda for today. And some quick team introductions here. We have Matthew, Justin, Peter, Micah, myself, Matei, and Hodrin.
Okay, so the purpose of our assessment was to find vulnerabilities and misconfigurations on your network that could lead to business operations disruptions. An example of a disruption would be a fine for not meeting regulations, or the decreased business due to customer concerns for user data protection, or outright loss of accreditation. During our assessment, we looked at 5 domains: the guest, user, AWS, and corporation and trains. We evaluated each domain's compliance with industry standards and regulations such as NIST, PCI DSS, and TSA requirements. We also identified vulnerabilities and exploitations that threat actors could use to gain access to sensitive information and or control Skyport systems. We hope that the issues that we outlined today will help you to reassess your risk tolerance and take proactive steps to further secure your network.
So real quick, I'm going to give you a quick overview of the threat landscape as it pertains to your organization. So we've distilled this down into 3 main critical categories. The first being ransomware. This is clearly the most pervasive threat that is in almost every industry around the globe. So we made sure to really focus in on how we could mitigate any risks that would lead to this exploitation. Additionally, we assess operational technology exploitation as something that is a critical threat to you, particularly, again, if an attacker is able to create physical effects on the network, starting or stopping the trams, that would be really bad. So we assess that as being the second most important threat. And third, radio frequency exploitation, really important. Again, this is just if an attacker is able to interfere with any wireless device communication, it would be really bad, right? So for instance, if the air traffic controller talking to the pilot's navigation system, and even the guest Wi-Fi access points around the passenger terminals. And so these are the 3 most important threats, and now we'll talk about our findings.
Thanks, Pete. So, time for some good news. Based on our previous assessment, we found that several vulnerabilities were remediated in our reassessment. The 3 that we determined to be the most important were web traffic encryption, permissions management, and implementation of network segmentation. So let's talk about web traffic. Previously, your websites were insecure, but now they are more secure using encryption. And this is good because it prevents leakage of customer data. Permissions management. Your network uses a software called group policy, which essentially is a list of regulations that computers follow to protect things like passwords and logins. And this is good as well. And finally, network segmentation. Previously, in our initial assessment, we found that everyone could talk to anyone else on the network. And this is not good because, for example, a guest on your guest network could talk to a machine on the train network, and we wouldn't want that. In our reassessment, we found that only certain people could talk with other certain people, and this is very good. Now I'll pass it off to Matt.
All right, so now we're going to talk about some of the findings that we discovered in our reassessment, in our re-engagement. So first I'm going to familiarize yourself with this graph. On the x-axis, we have unremediated, new, and remediated vulnerability count. On the y-axis, we have business risk severity based on industry standards, ranging from critical being the most severe to low being the least severe. So we started our assessment by searching for new vulnerabilities while checking for remediation of the previous vulnerabilities that we found in our initial assessment. And we found that a large number of vulnerabilities we initially discovered were partially or entirely remediated by your security team, so a really great job on their end. Particularly the network segmentation that Hodrin spoke of and the general improvement on authentication remediated about 20% of the original vulnerabilities we found alone. However, we did find a plethora of new vulnerabilities while running this reassessment. And the majority of those stem from new development tools and new development capabilities that were implemented on your network and your AWS cloud environment. Next slide, please. Touching on some of those key findings we found, these are specifically critical vulnerabilities. Again, we were able to get unauthorized access to the tram control system, meaning we could start and stop trams without any admin access. This is relevant because a malicious actor could exploit this to cause significant injury to RAKMS customers, which in turn could lead to pretty severe lawsuits and potentially a ceasage of all Skyport operations. Next, there was an exposed development tool that could allow you to leak boarding pass barcodes on the network. This is significant because those barcodes contain PII such as social security numbers and full names. Vulnerabilities such as this nature violate TSA guidelines and require immediate attention. Finally, there is still no adequate firewall present on the network. This was in our original findings, and we found that was not remediated correctly. While the network segmentation put in place did fix some of the domain and cross-domain issues that we found in our first engagement, not having a proper firewall in place still violates TSA guidelines and requires immediate attention from your security team.
And now to put some of these key findings into the context of various compliance and frameworks and guidelines. So we analyzed all of our findings through 3 critical guidelines and frameworks. First being the mandate from the TSA in March of 2023, which implemented 4 new security requirements, particularly for the aviation industry. Second being NIST guidelines, which are used by various regulatory bodies and third-party entities when conducting an audit or an assessment. And finally, payment card industry data security standards, which is important for anything that you're doing with regards to buying tickets, so on and so forth. And so the largest findings that are violations of these guidelines and frameworks were, again, the lack of firewall on each of the endpoints, so each of the systems. We had a few weak and or default passwords that need to be remediated, as well as, again, Matej will get a little bit more into it, but the way that the development team was going about producing new software in the network.
All right, so I'm going to talk a little bit about the business impact and what this actually means for RAKMS. So it's our opinion that no company, large or small, can afford poor cybersecurity practices. Many companies tend to take a reactive rather than a proactive approach to cybersecurity. We believe this is flawed because security costs can be very deceiving because they tend to be very incidental. So there are the direct costs of downtime and data damages that happen in mission critical systems. An hour of downtime for a critical system can cost companies millions of dollars. There are also regulatory fines for data breaches. One, we identified in particular the payment card industry data security standards. We identified a vulnerability that if an audit were to take place would cost RAKMS $30,000 in coverage for identity theft for loss of PII to customers. Additionally, there is no cap on the amount that can be recuperated for civil lawsuits for personal injury and privacy breaches in federal court. Finally, loss of public trust in business partners and potential shutdown and sanctions from organizations such as the TSA and FAA could have a total shutdown of airport operations while an investigation is taking place. We believe that small investments in these mitigations will pay great dividends in the long run.
That's it?
Yeah, so all of this talk of cost and compliance might be making you guys feel uneasy. That's completely understandable. The great news is, though, as executives, you all have the influence and the resources to deal with this at your level and to push it down through your organization. And this can happen at 3 different echelons. Starting granular endpoint security, this is about letting your people do what they do best, protecting individual systems on the network to allow people to serve customers. Moving all the way up through organizational structure at the broadest scope. This is about how teams within your organization interact with each other and how they share information. We recommend open sharing of information in order to allow the building of a coherent threat landscape, which will allow for the best protection of not just services, but the network as a whole and the organization, allowing you to conduct business. Thank you so much for your time, and we'd love to field some questions.
Thank you very much. We're really solid. You know, we're starting to get real serious about migrating to a more quantitative